I'm really looking forward to this interview. Alex Mill is an author, a very successful life coach, and he runs programs on meditation that you can take online or you can work with Alex directly. And today we're going to talk, Alex, about the relationship between meditative practices and creativity. And I'll just say for me, I'll start talking about myself, which I often do to a fault. But for me, meditation has been a huge breakthrough in writing my books. I wish I had the practice when I was back writing songs. I mean, I don't regret anything, but it would have made a big difference. And it has made a huge difference in my work as a writer. Anything I write and music I play, my world of writing and music have, and even creating my business and creating the products in my business, meditation has been, I would call it, the primary factor in me becoming more creative than I ever was. And your book was a huge turning point for me and other meditative books, but I really want to recommend your book. And you yourself are so amazingly creative. You're a wonderful artist, and in the book you've got these really great humorous illustrations you've done on meditation and how it works and why it works so well. So tell me a little bit about your background as a Zen teacher, a Zen coach, but also as a meditator. How did you find this field?
Okay, so I think meditation found me. I, um, I, I was the least likely candidate to have ended up doing what I ended up doing, and so, gosh, it was back in 1999. I wandered into a New Age bookstore reluctantly. My girlfriend at the time wanted to go in there with her friend and poke around, and I did my best to stay out of trouble. And I found a book on the counter and I picked it up. I started going through it and I got to this passage that literally blew open my world. It essentially said something like, uh, one process does not lead to another, so happiness does, having something doesn't come from wanting it, and wanting it does not come from having it only comes from having it. And it got me very interested in what this spiritual practice could possibly be like, because the author was describing my life through the words that she was using, because I thought I had my entire life arranged right there in front of me, like it was perfect. I had the perfect job, I had the perfect partner, I had everything was completely, planets were aligned, and yet I still found myself searching and hunting for the next thing. And I found this dissatisfaction to be rampant throughout my entire life. And so I wanted to learn more about this. I started collecting more books until I found the irony of collecting meditation books, but not meditating. And so I finally sat down and did it. I bought a meditation cushion that night when I realized it, and things just went there from there. I trained in a Zen monastery for 13 and a half years, and now that I'm out, uh, 2013, I came out of the monastery, and I've just been creating nonstop, just feeling the energy of what it is that I wanted to share, and practicing redirecting my attention to whatever could get me to help people with whatever they were particularly struggling with at the time with what I had learned.
Yes, and I'm so glad you did because it's been such a help to so many people. And I used to believe that I was recently watching a master class by a woman who writes fiction. And she said the number one obstacle, and she's written many, many books, the number one obstacle to being prolific and really producing, really putting your book out there is distraction.
Mhm.
And I used to believe external distraction was what she was talking about. But what I found through meditation was my number one obstacle to creating, producing was internal distraction. Believing all these thoughts that came up, believing these voices, and once I started opening up the interior through meditation, I was able in the external world to put my attention on whatever I was writing or creating in a much easier way.
Mhm.
So tell me what you think is occurring for people. And you've been prolific, creative. You have 4 books out, not only the one on meditation that's so good, but I also really recommend this one to people, which is a series of stories. And those just seem to flow from you. What is the relationship that you see between meditation and creativity?
So for me, and my personal experience is that meditation is the foundation for being able to direct the attention away from what you described as the thoughts or the voices. It's like having somebody in the background who is constantly like you're trying to do math problems and someone's randomly spouting out numbers, and it's difficult to stay focused because my attention is constantly being distracted by this something whatever constantly commenting on what it is that I'm doing. And it's not exactly helpful. You know, that's the thing that people become really clear about when if you spend any time meditating, that I like to call them voices because it's helpful for me to see them as separate from myself, that they are not something that I'm consciously creating. It's something that's being done to me. You know, so in our culture, we have a way of talking about like I beat myself up, or I get in my own way, or I'm my own worst enemy, and it's this confusion around I am whatever is occurring within me. And so meditation allows us to really slow down and see what's going on for what it is. That there is this force, these voices talking to us who are, in my experience, I found that they have a tendency to talk us into doing what is unhelpful and out of doing what would be helpful. And so, creativity, when we have the ability to shift our attention away from them to here with what it is that I want to create, it's like a direct beeline to, or is it, what is it? Yeah, it's a beeline, right? I was trying to picture like the letter B, but it's actually a beeline. A bee goes straight toward whatever it is that it wants to create. And so it's removing the friction or the resistance. I like to think of it as a clean conduit for being able to channel whatever is coming through. I'm allowing myself, meditation allows me to sit and receive, and then uh, once I've received, I can go ahead and give, and so it becomes this endless cycle of receiving and giving that is so beautiful, and it becomes really effortless as you begin to practice that more and more. It's like it really is like that clean, empty space for whatever it is that I want to put out there to put out there. I'll never forget, you know, my teacher would talk about creating a workshop. And we were curious about how do you create a workshop? What goes into doing that? So she just shared that. So on the day of the workshop, I will sit down with my cup of tea, open my journal, and I will start creating the workshop right there that morning. And it won't be there before she opens her journal, and that it will completely be there when she picks up her pen and starts writing. And I've never forgotten that because it gave me a feeling and a semblance of I'm in charge of becoming or being the person who has the ideas, and so that I'm not at the mercy of waiting for the right mood or taking my emotional temperature in order to be able to do what I need to do. And I'll have these sessions with clients where I'll say, look, you have absolute ability to do that. Think of an ER person who shows up at the scene of an accident and there's somebody who's bleeding and going to die if you don't attend to it. The ER person does not go, oh, the sight of blood, I can't handle this. This is so traumatic. Because if that person were to indulge that part of themselves, the person would die. That person just does the work, shows up without any questions asked. But because we have the ability to entertain this, this takes everything and makes everything hundreds of times more difficult, and basically stops us out of doing so much.
Yes, so now I know you do a lot of coaching now, and you have workshops online for learning meditation. So let's say I come to you and say, Alex, I've always wanted to write a book or write a song or do some painting, but every time try it or start it, there's it feels like an inner critic, inner skeptic talks me out of it. Um, so how do you work with a person who believes every thought that comes up that says, no, you shouldn't. Who are you to write a book? No one's. You don't have any original thoughts. And how do you work with somebody who's all blocked like that?
Yeah. So I have this approach that, and I learned it from the monastery. It's not something that I really came up with or anything like that. It's for me, in my experience, awareness is the most powerful tool to help people free themselves from not just being able to write a song or write a book, but in all areas of your life. And so um, awareness is nothing more complicated than shining the light onto what it is that's getting between you and where you want to be. So much of what I see out in the world is this kind of, no, you can do it, it's going to be fine, you're really not that, you're going to be okay, and it's fine. There's a certain energy that's built up to that to help somebody. You see it when you're running a marathon and things like that. But for someone who's having a hard time getting started or getting through something, I enjoy the process of exposing everything that's getting between them and beginning, right? So what are the voices saying? Get really super clear about how resistance works. And this applies to even meditation, because we'll see it if so since we're talking about meditation, it's the single most the biggest thing that gets between people and meditating are the voices themselves. And I've always seen it as the irony is the very thing that will free you from the voices will stop you from doing it. And so it's a catch 22. I enjoyed being at the monastery because it gave me the wisdom of no escape, right? It's the door was locked. I'd have to hitchhike to the nearest town, and if I needed to climb over the monastery wall, to get out. And so I committed myself to seeing this through. And out in the world, it's very challenging to see ourselves through anything because the voices can so easily talk us into bailing on ourselves. And so if I'm working with someone, I like to create strong agreements and a commitment around, we're going to use everything in your experience to see how this happens so that you can free yourself of it. And there are no mistakes in any of this, right? It's not always going to be fun and easy. I like to say that the feeling of fear and excitement go parallel with each other, right? So fear are what the voices are experiencing, and excitement is what you authentically are feeling as you do this. And so the opportunity in this is to know that the more fear you experience, the more excitement that's waiting for, more success that's waiting for you on the other end, on the other side of the voices. And so in my world, resistance is a wonderful thing. Some of my clients started doing this gesture where they're like this, like, so whenever they're having difficulty, they'll mirror me and I start doing this, it's like, oh boy, this is going to be good, right? Because we're going to really look at this. We're going to get, what do they say to you? What are they talking you into? How does this happen? again, this works with your book, works with your song, meditation itself, even even a meditation that you don't do is useful to you because you can ask yourself, how did this not happen? And get really curious. And once that question enters your mind, you're into the mind of curiosity, openness, uh, receiving. It's the mind that knows everything and is trying to force, the square peg through the round hole that is getting in the way. But staying in this, I don't know, place is is really a major ability to start to cultivate through meditation. It's because that's what we're doing in meditation. We're staying open. Okay, what's this experience like? How about that one?
Yes, and what gets cultivated over time is the awareness that, for me, replaces the permanent little person I thought I was.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something I've noticed with my grandchildren, and I remember it with my children, is the flow of creativity comes very easy for young people. If I give them a big pad and finger paints, or if I hand them, or my little grandson walks up to the piano, there's never there aren't the voices that say you're not good on the piano, you're not good enough to play, or you're not an artist, or it's just not there. So, how much of meditation, your 13 and a half years in the monastery, was a form of actually unlearning something
That's right.
over time?
Mhm. Yeah, so that's absolutely so. So the younger the child, the less of the social conditioning and the messages about how you can and can't do certain things. Cause that's in my experience, that's what we're really carrying around with us today. It was meant to be helpful. Was meant to. Some of it wasn't even intentional. Some of it's not even. A lot of it's not even true. But we carry it around with us nonetheless. And so, getting clear about how that works and practicing seeing through the lies that are being told is part of the practice that I offer and teach people. So the the online program that I put together is a journey from being in relationship with this, getting really clear about that, and then shifting it over to what can actually coach and mentor ourselves. Because we and if you're a coach, or if you have actually helped a child learn something, you know that this we can be with another being in a very different way, a very loving, compassionate. I mean, you could even be with animals too. We're really, compassionate with animals, and we see their innocence just like the innocence in a child, and we're able to. We want to do what's best for that, but the voices confuse everything and make us separate from, because they themselves are separate from life, so they project onto us that we're separate, we need to be treated differently. And so the biggest obstacle that I find sometimes in helping somebody is getting them to see that themselves from the outside, as another person would, or as an inanimate object would. Some of the most powerful exercises I've done with people are, what does your vase say about you? Like, what story would your vase write about you in your day-to-day life? And so they journal about, my vase thinks that I'm, this, that, and the other thing. And it's usually like a very eye-opening experience. Like, wow, I'm pretty okay. And I'm telling you, that's like the door opening for somebody finally seeing themselves as a part of life, instead of this constant self-improvement program that the voices are putting me on to overcome all of this past and become this person that I need to be. And it's this uphill slog, and this constant pull back and digression and regression into, and it's really not that. That's the joy of that child, is that they run really fast, fall down, bang their knee up, cry and wail, have tons of energy. And then once that's over, they get right back up again, and it's like, whee, right? And that's what we have available to us. And I think meditation allows us to be able to redirect our attention wherever we want, because any true emotion, it doesn't really last ongoing. I have to keep putting it, the voices keep putting it back into my consciousness over and over again, so I can keep staying debilitated by this emotion. And um, meditation is simply an opportunity to redirect it to where it would serve me most.
Yes, and when you talk about the base, you're talking, correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about the universal consciousness and awareness that is who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
And then inside of that, these voices and thoughts arise, but they're not you.
That's right.
They've come from the culture, they're echoes of past criticism. And the more spaciousness you learn to acquire on the inside, the more you see who you really are. And for me, I've been from that, I've been able to create so much more, so much faster, because the editor isn't there saying, "What would people think of that?" Or, "You can't write that," or, "No one's going to
Mm-hmm.
understand that." The editor is like, "Yeah, you're in. I get who you are. You're a
Right,
hologram or something. You're not real. You're not
right,
real." And keep talking because it doesn't bother me. Because the real me, the base, the awareness, is just creating and creating.
correct.
And I love your work. You've written 4 books. These are the two I recommend the most. Not because I don't like the others, but these are two. And you know, the
Thanks.
shift to love is so beautiful. You've got a whole collection of little Zen stories. And for me, what it really got me to realize was so many years of my life, um, love was something that was either there or it wasn't. There was no shift inside me available to love, back to love, or remembering of love, of who I really am. It wasn't there. And I think now, with all the studies in neuroscience, neuroplasticity, all the studies that have been done of meditation and the effect on the brain, have dispelled this old idea in a scientific way. Of course, the Buddhist people who have dispelled it for 3,000 years experientially uh, have just smiled in agreement with what the neuroscientists have found, that you're not locked into who you think you are.
Right.
Like, I think I'm not creative. Well, no, that's some voice. That's
That's
not
right.
reality. You're not locked in. You can shift. And I love that about the book. And thank you so much for being here. I'll be the first to do the
Thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. I
All
appreciate
right.
it.